on the Camp Creek fire. We've got a new IR flight, but we're still sitting just under 2,000 acres. It's August 31st. I don't know if I said that. So our acreage hasn't changed a whole lot, but we still do have a fire out there. So I'm going to explain what we're doing with the fire, and I'm going to start outside, and then I'm going to work inside to actually what's happening close to the fire. So I'll step back from the map a little bit. The fire's here in the Bull Run watershed, and for some context, we've got the Highway 26. We've got the towns of Furwood, and then here we have Sandy, and then Portland's here off to the left. And this is the Portland watershed. So this is our 2,000 acre fire right in here on the forest. So large picture, what we're doing to protect these communities is we have what's called a structure protection group specialist, and what he's doing is he's supervising some people and helping make a plan by coordinating with all of the fire districts, the fire departments, and law enforcement to come up with plans in case this fire should cross this road. What's the next step? Well, do we start evacuating? What would cause that evacuation? And if we get to the point where we would need to start evacuating communities or protecting structures, he knows where all those structures are, what they look like, and what fuel mitigations we can do, what protections we can put in place where we might need to use the aircraft to help protect those communities. He's also worked quite a bit with Portland on the water treatment facility, and they already have protections in place, meaning they have removed fuels from out around the plant, and they've tried to limit the impact of the fire if the fire should get close to that. All those protection elements are in place, and what that looks like is they've removed fuels from around the buildings, they've put hoses on the ground, they've put sprinkler kits around to keep all of those, the vegetation around wet, and then taken down hazard trees that would have the potential of falling on the structures. So all that is happening outside on the periphery. So we're looking at 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles out is kind of where his scope is right now. The next layer in would be what we call our contingency group. Currently, he's working on protecting the Brightwood communication towers. There's at least 3 sites up there. They've got one of those done, and they're doing that same kind of mitigation work. They remove the brush, remove any hazard trees. Basically, what the goal is they try to make it so if the fire comes close to those buildings, it doesn't affect them, doesn't burn the buildings, no trees fall on them. So that'll take probably another day or so working up there. The other thing that the contingency is working on are some secondary and some tertiary lines in case our main protection line doesn't work. So he's looking at old logging roads, ridge lines where we can put in other control features like a dozer line where they can take the trees down and make another fire line further out here to help prevent the fire from growing. We haven't started putting those lines in. We don't know if we will, but we want a plan in place. And so he's going to put a plan in place, put lines on the maps, and then make lists of resources to order. So bulldozers and falling equipment and hand crews and engines that we would need if we get to a certain point where we need to engage those plans. So that contingency group supervisor, that's what he's doing, is making really detailed plans kind of all the way around here if our protection measures get beyond where we feel comfortable. So that's kind of the big outside picture. On the inside, we have what we call division supervisors, and they're in charge of kind of a piece of pie. So this piece right here is Division Papa. So what he's going to be doing is supervising all of the people that are along this road here. What's happening on the 14 road right now is they've taken a lot of the fuels. That's pretty heavy, dense fuels. The road's narrow. So they've cut all those fuels down to really low brush and removed a lot of the trees, so it's a little bit more open canopy. What that does for us is when the fire comes close to the road, instead of being 150-foot flame lengths in the trees, it's really low and short, and so we have the ability to control it, and there's a lot less likelihood that it's going to jump this road. Because it's not next to the road, one of the things that we're also doing is we're introducing a little bit of fire along that road. We call it a burnout. So we have firefighters out there, hand crews, and they have special devices that put fire down, and we showed you some pictures of that yesterday. And so what that does is allows us to be in control of the fire, not the fire to be in control. So we wait for conditions to be right, and we eliminate all those fuels so we can just eliminate that out of the equation. The only problem we have right now is that it's really wet, which is good, and this rain is really helping us. It's keeping the bigger fire down, but because it is pretty wet, a lot of that understory is just a little too humid for the fire to carry. And what we want is we want a good continuous burn between the edge of the fire and the road, so we have a good buffer. So right now, we're kind of waiting for it to dry out a little bit so we can clean that up. There still is a fire in there. The fire is not going to go away, but there's a lot less smoke, which helps, but we still have a lot of work ahead of us to do. So those efforts are continuing on the 14 road. In addition to people burning and opening the fuels on that road, we have a hose lay system there and then a sprinkler system in this small portion here, which I'll explain in a minute. What that does, that allows us to deliver water all along that road, regardless of whether there's engine access or heavy equipment access. We have people that can man hose lines and both cool down the fire here, or if we have a spot fire go outside the line, they can go pick that up really easily. So this black edge here, what we have, the reason it's black is we're using that as what we call a control line, and the reason it's marked with an R is that denotes to us that it's a road that's being used as a control line. And as we wrap this fire, you'll see more of these black lines and more edge of the fire will become black, and that's how we quantify if the fire is contained or not, is we start adding up how much of the edge of this fire is black or controlled. And right now it's 0% controlled, but pretty soon we're going to start seeing some of that percentage go up as that fire creeps up against the edge, and we're confident that it won't get outside those lines. We have a little bit of what we call a pocket here, so the fire isn't against a road or anything, and so we call that an unburned pocket. In order to contain that, because it's steep, we put what's called a hand line. We had some hand crews go in there, they cut a narrow saw line, and then they basically build a trail so that the fuel is gone in a section, maybe this wide, and so when the fire burns up to that area, it can't continuously burn. So we have that hand line in there, as well as a hose line and some sprinklers, so we can keep that wet, and we can, as the fire burns up close to that, we can start introducing a little bit of fire and then burn that back in to keep the fire inside our containment lines. The 12 road right here, you'll see again is marked with those R's, so that denotes we're using the road as fire line. Right up along here where the fire has met the road, that's pretty much done contained line. It's getting pretty cold, and we're getting to the point where we can start mopping up that portion, but that's where we started doing a little bit of burnout a couple of days ago. So we're pretty comfortable with that. There's still a little bit of heat in there, but pretty soon, probably tomorrow, we'll consider that as contained line. So like I said, you'll start seeing that percentage go up. That firing continued up here, and this road is all prepped, just like the 14, where they've removed those fuels, and they'll continue that firing operation as weather allows, with the goal of closing that gap so that all the screen goes away and it's red, and then we have a nice tight black edge, and we're confident the fire won't jump out of there. So those two edges we're pretty happy about. It's just going to take a little bit of time for those to close up. So we've got Papa, we've got Alpha. Now let's talk about Division Kilo, which is a little bit more complicated. We have this road network to use, which is roads make things a lot easier. The problem is we kind of need to connect across here. So what we have to do is we have to build a fire line across here to kind of minimize the acreage. So this purple is showing is proposed line. So we have a combination of a dozer line or machine line, which is the M, and then some hand lines, so a hand crew will put in. And the difference is that of those two is based on the terrain and the fuels and what equipment we can use to get in there. So on this bottom half, we're able to get some bulldozers in and some logging equipment to open that canopy up, remove the fuels. The terrain on this upper end between here and here is a little bit more complicated, a little bit steeper, so we've used a hand crew to go in there and put a hand line in. Once that line is open, so trees are open and we've created kind of a small pathway in the fuels, then we're going to dig down to what we call mineral soil, and then we're going to plumb it, put a hose lay in there, and then we'll start mopping that up. The nice thing about this edge is it's really close to the edge of the fire, so what we call that is direct, right on the edge, as opposed to going clear out here indirect. We always prefer this, but if the fire's too big and too hot, we can't really get next to it. One of the things that's taking a lot of time is the hazard tree mitigations. We've got a lot of big trees out there that have the potential of falling on our firefighters, and we try to minimize that risk as much as possible. So we've taken a lot of time with some falling teams and gone in there and tried to remove those hazard trees. The next piece would be we're planning doing the same thing we've done here with machine line and with hand line to connect these two roads. We're going to do that same thing over here. We just don't exactly know where it's going to make sense to connect those. So probably in the next couple of days we'll see some planned lines, and once this machine line is done and the equipment's freed up here, we're going to do the same thing here. We're pretty confident that's going to work, but if it doesn't, we have equipment opening up these roads and doing the same thing here over here, where we removed the fuels and made it so we can use the road as a fire line. We're continuing to do that with the equipment that we have over here. So we like to have a plan, and we like to have a backup plan, and then we like to have a backup plan on the backup plan. So that's kind of the layered system that we have going. One of the questions we get a lot is what's going on with the aircraft. So we still have a handful of aircraft today. Because of the weather and the visibility, they won't be flying a whole lot, and because it's wet, what we need the aircraft for is to knock the heat out of the fire, and then we put people on the ground to actually put the fire out. Well, the heat's already knocked out of the fire because the humidity's high and it's raining, so we don't really need that component today, but we're going to keep those aircraft attached to our fire and available so that we have them when we need them. But we probably won't see a lot of them flying today. Maybe one airplane that's kind of we'll use it as a lookout. It's kind of an air resource for us to kind of watch what's going on to make sure, and then if the air quality improves, he can get the helicopters or the fixed wings, the scoopers, going as soon as we need. So I think that kind of lays out all the different layers that we have going on. We are pretty confident with the plan that we have, and with the weather, we're going to try to take as much advantage of it as possible, but there's still a lot of work out there, and there's still a lot of firefighters out there working hard to put this and keep this as small as possible. Thanks for joining us today.